I released a video very recently that was about grid trading. It was a strategy that I saw on an expert Forex video. And this grid was different to the typical grid in that this doesn't allow the price to simply run away with you. It actually has an endpoint for the grid where all trades are closed out. When I wrote the code for this grid trading system, I followed the strategy exactly as outlined by expert Forex. And that strategy as outlined leads to some operational issues in terms of overtrading. Now, I very cleverly hid this from everyone by talking about it, including comments like this, including notes in the video description and notes in the GitHub download. But despite my best attempts to hide that from everyone, a number of people picked up that there was possible improvement. So today I'm going to address those improvements that I can make to the grid trading system without altering the actual strategy. This is simply operational methods that we can use to improve the way this runs. What I'll be showing today is simply a modification to the code that was already written. So I will leave a link to the earlier video in the description, and you should go to that because you'll be able to download the original code. And you'll need to have that to be able to follow along and make the changes that I'm going to be working through today. I'll also leave a link to the original video from Expert Forex where they describe this strategy. And so I'll be addressing 4 different things today. First, I want to address a piece of code that I had in the original video, and because the video was getting a little long, I didn't fill it out any further, but it was about exiting the grid when it does hit the stop loss. Then I want to address the simple overtrading where we're creating trades and closing them unnecessarily. Then I'm also going to look at the start point of the grid and how we can improve that. And then finally, I'm just going to tidy up the code a little because once I've made those other changes, I can tidy the code and make it a little more manageable. So let's start with that piece of code for exiting the grid that I left last time. So the first thing I want to address, I suppose, is in the original I have this piece of code. If the level count is greater than or equal to 4, that's the level where we will completely stop out all trades. And I built in these lines where I print the stop loss has been hit, stopping the expert, and then the expert remove. And I explained at the time that was because you may want to simply stop the expert, because if you've hit that stop loss level, then it could mean that the markets are doing things you don't expect and you don't want to simply open another grid. I also said that this has a couple of problems. That if you don't want to use that, then you have to edit the code and remove this, but also that it doesn't have the resilience of the closed grid. So if you did see the earlier video, then the closed grid, if that fails to close the entire grid, if there's a trade left over, then this will keep retrying until all the trades in the grid are closed. But if we go to this expert remove statement, then the expert simply gets removed. And if the closed grid has been unsuccessful before that, then you'll have trades left over and the expert will have been removed and there's nothing more you can do about it. So I'm going to address both of those problems. I'll take the first one first, and I'm going to make this optional to do the expert remove. And to do that, I'm going to create an input and some conditional statements so that you can easily use that or not use it without having to edit the code. Now these files are already in this V2 folder that I've created, so I've simply copied V1 into V2. And now I'm going to be modifying these. I'll just add a comment here to indicate what I'm doing for V2. It's fixing the exit on stop loss. I'm going to create an input here, which is going to be a Boolean, so that you can set that on the inputs for the expert to indicate whether you want to exit if you hit the stop loss or not. So simply calling that input Boolean IMP exit on stop loss, and I'm defaulting that to true. I need to pass this value then to the expert. To save time and not modify the constructor for the expert, I'm going to use a bit of a hack. This is not generally regarded as the best practice, but if this is entirely for your own use, it shouldn't be a problem. So what I'm going to be doing is simply setting a variable on the expert object. So this variable, I haven't created it yet, but this exit on stop loss will be the variable inside the expert object, and I'm simply setting that to the value from the IMP exit on stop loss. And it is a bit of a hack because you wouldn't normally expose variables from classes. And that's all we need to do in the stop loss grid. So now we need to address the changes in the expert. First change is actually to create that exit on stop loss variable. And because I'm setting that directly from outside the class, it must be a public variable. So I'm putting it here in the public section. And that's a simple declaration of a variable, bool m exit on stop loss. Now in class variables, I can't set a default value for variables. So I can't say bool m exit on stop loss equals true or false. I have to do that in the constructor. So in the constructor here, I'm setting m exit on stop loss equals true. And that's just in case you don't bother to set it from the outside. I want to make sure that it has a known value. So if you do forget or not use this statement, then it will be set to the default value of true. And then all that remains to make this a condition is to come here and I insert a condition if m exit on stop loss. And so now the expert remove will only happen if you have the exit on stop loss set to true. The close grid will close the entire grid with the stop loss at level 4 will still happen because that's here outside that condition, but the expert remove is able to be set now from an input. And remember, this code is in 2 places, so I'm just going to copy this. And down here in the sell side of the grid, I do the same thing. If m exit on stop loss, prints the same message, and expert remove. I know it's poor to have this code in 2 places, and I am addressing that a little later in this video. So that takes care of the first part, which is setting an option for you to exit. Now I want to fix the second part of the problem, which is that this expert remove will happen without a retry in case of the closed grid failing. And I'm going to do that by creating another function similar to closed grid that handles exiting for the expert. Back to the top of the code, and I already have this void close grid. I'm going to create another function as well called exit grid. The close grid function uses a global boolean, that's this m closing, so I'm going to now create an m exiting, which will tell me that my code is meant to be exiting the expert. Now the m closing is currently reset every time we start a new grid. I want to do the same with the m exiting. I know it should only happen once, but I'm just going to do exactly the same as I've done for closing, and that reset happens in the reset counters function. So I'm going to go to that, and I'm just initializing that in the same way. And now if I go back to the code where I have the expert remove, remember this is still in 2 places. This is for the buy side. I'm going to replace these lines, the print and the expert remove, with a call to the exit grid function. And then there's also this return statement. So if the close grid has been unsuccessful, the exit grid will also be unsuccessful, and that's why I have this return, and it will cause this to cycle back through the exit grid again. I'll just do that same thing on the sell side. And now the close grid, the safe closing of the grid is handled. Let me scroll to the top of this loop. It's handled here that the very first thing that happens when we enter this loop is that if the m closing is set to true, then we simply attempt to close the grid again and return. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for exiting. So if the m exiting variable is true, then I'm going to attempt to exit the grid and return. Remembering, of course, that if the exit grid is successful, then the expert will be shut down, and so this return won't happen anyway. But this will force, once we set the m exiting to true, it will keep attempting to exit the grid until we are successful. And then all that's left is to write the exit grid function. I'm going to place it just after close grid, so I'll go to definition for that. So here is the exit grid function. If we are not exiting, if not m exiting, then I'm just going to print a message. So the first time we call this, m exiting should be false because we're simply trying to exit. And then I just want to print a message, which is the hit stop loss stopping the expert message. And then I set m exiting to true, so this print will only happen once. And then I call close grid. Now I know that we've attempted to close the grid before calling the exit, but if the close grid was unsuccessful, this is how I'm forcing the exit to attempt to close the grid until it is successful. So I call close grid, and if we are still m closing, so m closing is set to false if close grid is successful. If M closing is true, then that means we still have an open grid. So if M closing, then return. And if we get through to this point, then I know that the grid has been closed successfully because M closing is false. And then I can simply call expert remove. So that takes care of the safe shutdown in case you call the exit grid, but the close hasn't been successful for some reason. And so what this will cause is that each tick will go through that loop statement. It will say, I'm currently in exiting mode because M exiting has been set to true. And it will call exit grid again and again and just keep doing that until it successfully closes the grid and then shuts down the expert. And all of that now happens only if you set the input variable to say that you do want to exit the grid on the stop loss. So now that I've taken care of the safe exiting of the grid, let's look at the strategy. And as I said, I've written the original expert exactly as the strategy was described. So here on the screen, I've mapped out all the stages of the grid. We open up the grid with a buy and a sell, and I'm only mapping out the buy side. So if the price rises from the initial level 0, because the price dropping below that level 0 is exactly the same, just in the opposite direction. So as the original strategy stated, as came from Expert Forex, we buy and sell at level 0. The price goes up to level 1. We close the buy, that's this minus B, open another buy, and open a sell. So that gives us the profit from that initial buy, and we now have another buy open. And then if the price comes back to level 0, we close everything. So we've got one buy and two sells to close. One of those sells, this initial one, is at a profit of 0, so it's a break even, and the other one coming from here is at a profit of 1. If the price continues to rise from level 1 up to level 2, we do the same thing again. We close the buy that we have, which is in profit, open another buy, and open a sell, and then that comes back and we close everything again, and so on. And at level 3, if we get there, we open another buy, close the buy, and open another sell. It's obvious here that what we are doing at each level is closing a buy trade and opening another buy trade, which is achieving nothing more than giving spread and commissions to the broker. So what we want to do is eliminate these trades. And that's very simple. We simply won't do them. And so this first piece of code that I'm going to show will eliminate these trades from the system. It has no impact on the closing because we still, after we eliminate this closing of a buy and opening of another buy, we still have this trade from the buy open. So we still, when we get to the exit point here, close this buy and the two sell trades, which are here and here. So no impact on what we close. It just affects the intermediate stages where we reach new levels. And so then the new structure would look like this. We open a buy and a sell at the beginning, and we just open a sell at each level above, and all the closings are the same. So now let's go to the code and see how we would do that. Now to the code to fix that problem of opening and closing trades unnecessarily. I've made a copy of the V2 code that we've just modified, and I've simply put that in this folder V3. I've got the stop loss grid, .mq5, .mqh, and the expert all open here. The only change in the stop loss grid MQH is that I've just added a comment line to say version 3 I'm removing the pointless close and open. All the changes will happen inside the expert. So now in the expert, if I come down to the loop here, I want to change the lines in this section of code, and this occurs in both the buy and the sell side, so I'll have to make these changes twice. First is to remove this if closed position type buy, so I'm removing the unnecessary close, and then I'm removing the unnecessary open that follows that. Delete those. Let me just fix the indentation on these. Take out the extra closing bracket that was left over from those statements. Now I had a condition here, if the buy price is equal to 0 or the exit price is equal to 0. These results are coming back from the open positions, but I'm not opening the buy now, so I just remove that, and I'll simply leave this at exit price equal to 0 for that condition. Now I still want to increment the buy price, but I'm simply going M buy price plus equals M level size. So now that's a simple increment. Now to do the same on the sell side, I delete the same two lines, change the indentation there, remove that closing bracket, remove the condition for the sell price equal to 0, and that's also a simple increment, M sell price minus equals level size. So that takes care of the unnecessary opening and closing of a trade in exactly the same direction, which if we leave that there, all it does is give money to the broker in terms of spread and commission. So now that we've seen the code to remove those very obvious buy and sell trades, there's something else that I can see here. At the very beginning of the grid, we open a buy and a sell. We're no longer closing that buy and opening a new buy at each level, but we do always close that buy at the exit point. We also open this sell, which will remain open again until any of these exit points. So what we effectively have is this single buy and sell that gets closed out here, 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 and here. And because it's a buy and a sell, they're netting each other off. And again, all we're doing is giving spread and commission to the broker. What we can do is eliminate these completely. So we want to get rid of this, which will eliminate this, 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 and this. And that will give us a different looking grid because now we no longer have something opening at level 0 at all. And this is what the grid will look like after all of that tidy up. None of this has changed the original strategy. This is exactly as planned. We're still closing out. We're still getting the same profits and the same losses at each level, but we've eliminated some of the costs associated by removing trades that effectively did nothing for us. So let's see how we now eliminate that original level 0 buy and sell. Now the code to remove those matching opening trades. The only change here in the stop loss grid.mqh again is just this comment v4 remove pointless starting trades, and as before I've simply taken all of the v3 code, copied into this v4 folder, and so we're starting with the same code that we finished version 3 with. All the essential changes are going to happen inside the expert.mqh, and everything will be done inside the open grid function. So let me go to open grid. I can just right click on open grid and go to definition. Here we are at open grid. So I can just remove all of these lines that have anything to do with opening a trade. So I can remove all of the buy opens, and I can remove all of these sell open statements. I'm just leaving this buy price and sell price for the moment. And what I'm going to do instead of the opening of the trades, I'm simply going to set the buy price to the ask price with symbol info double for the M symbol variable, symbol underscore ask, that's the buy price, and for the sell price I do the same thing for symbol underscore bid. So those two statements will give me the initial price where I would have opened those trades, assuming that the open happened without slippage, but that's what I want to do for the grid. So this simply gives me the starting price for buy and sell, and then I want to set the next level, and that's as simple as buy price plus equals level size and sell price minus equals level size. And that gives me exactly the same result that I had before, but without actually opening those two trades. And that's all I need to do in this one function to remove those pointless opening trades. And now the next change I want to make is just cleaning up the code, and I've mentioned this already in the video. And it's because I have this code for the buy side reaching a level or the sell code reaching a level, and that's all duplicated code. There are slight differences in here, but what I want to do is just have one block of code so that if I make any further changes, I can make it in just one place. And I've actually held off making the change until this point because this code has been cleaned up a little from where we started, and it's going to be easier for me to make common code out of this now after the changes we've just made. So to do this, I'm going to create a single function that I can call from the buy side or the sell side. So I'll still have these conditions for the buy and the sell separately, but inside those I'll be making a single call to a function that will handle everything else. First I'm going to declare that function. So let's just go to the top of the code. I'm going to place it after this closed position statement. I'm going to call this function new level. It's void because there's nothing to return. So new level, I need to know which type of order I'm opening or closing. I need to know the new level price, and that's why I've got this as a by reference call. So double ampersand level price means that this function is able to set that level price variable, and then it becomes available to the rest of the code. And then the other thing I want is the opposite price, because I also need to know the price for the opposite side of the grid. And that's mainly because when I start a grid, I don't know if it's going to the buy side or the sell side. And as soon as it reaches level 1, I set the price for the opposite side to 0, which just tells me which direction the grid's running. So I'm passing this opposite price, even though it's really only useful when we reach level number 1. So now to apply that inside the loop, now down here, this statement, if buy price is greater than 0 and bid is greater than or equal to buy price, that means I've reached a level on the upper side of the grid, so on the buy side of the grid. But remember, with the changes we've just made, we are only selling. But I'm still going to leave these statements as calling it buy price, because that just makes it a little easier to understand that we're moving up through the buy levels, but at each of those levels we sell because we're looking at the grid to come backwards. And all I need to do then is call the new level function, and I'm passing an order type sell, because on the buy side of the grid we are selling to come back towards the 0 level. I'm passing in the buy price because that gets reset in all of this code, and I'm passing in the current sell price because if we have reached level 1, that will get set to 0. And you'll see all this when we write that new level function. And then I can remove all of this code. And you can see that makes it much cleaner. I can do the same then for the sell side. Just make a call to that new level, but in this case it's an order type buy, and then I'm simply reversing the sell price and the buy price in that call. So now I no longer have code duplicated, but I do have to create that code now in the new level function. Now I'm going to insert that new level function just here. That's just below the loop. There's the arguments, the order type, and that's the type of order that we're going to open. Now, it might be a little confusing here because I've left the terminology in the grid the same. I'm saying that if the price has moved up from the starting 0 level of the grid, then I'm on the buy side of the grid. But now with the recent changes, we're only selling while we're on the buy side. And if the price has moved down from that 0 level, then we're only buying. So the order type is the type of order that we're going to be placing, although I'm actually still calling it in things like the display levels, the buy side and the sell side. Then there's the level price. So that's the new price where another level will be set. So if we're on the buy side, so if we're on the upper side of the grid, that level price will be one level size above the new sell trade that we place. And then the opposite price, that's really only here so that when we hit that first level, so remember at 0 we're not placing any trades. When we hit level 1, then we'll set that opposite price to 0, and that tells the rest of the code that we're already setting a direction for the grid and we're not just waiting for that first trade. Now a lot of this will be very similar from the code that I've just removed up here. Level count plus plus, we just need to know how many levels we've executed. I set opposite price to 0. I don't care if it's already been set to 0. This really doesn't take any time to execute, so that just makes sure that I know which direction the grid's moving. I have this multiplier now because I'm handling trades in both directions in one piece of code. So instead of simply being able to add or subtract values, I need to know which direction they're going. And so I'm setting multiplier. If the order type is buy, then this is -1. So remember, order type buy, we're looking for retracements in the grid. So if I'm placing a buy trade, I'm actually looking for the price to come back by 1. So the multiplier is -1 on the buy trades and it's +1 for the sell trades. You'll see that used a little later in the code. I have the same code if M level count is greater than or equal to 4. I just want to close. That doesn't matter if we're on the buy side or the sell side. We just call close grid. Here's the code we had for the exit on stop loss, exit grid, and return. If we haven't reached that stop loss point, then M exit price equals open position, And previously this would have been order type buy or order type sell because we had the code duplicated. Now we're calling once to this function and we're actually passing in the order type. So open position order type. And that returns the price where that order was placed, whether it's a buy or a sell order. If that price is 0, I still have this condition and I'm going to close the grid because that means we failed to open a trade and I'm just giving up at that point on the grid. Now, once we have that exit price, I need to know where the next level on the grid is, the price where we reach that next level. So the level price plus equals level size multiplied by multiplier. Level price was passed in. Here it is. And so if we're placing an order type buy, let me just scroll up a little further. If we're placing an order type buy, it means we're on the low side of the grid and the new level is the next price where we're going to sell a trade. So if we're on the lower side of the grid, then we're looking at sell prices, and the new level, we're going to be placing an order type buy, and then we're going to set the new level price at the next point where we're going to execute another order type buy. So that will feed back into this statement next time round. So that level price is going to be the next price where we execute another order. So what I want to say is level price plus equals level size by multiplier. Now, if we're on the high side of the grid, then level price is going to be one level above where we're placing this trade. So let's just go through the values that we would have created here. If we're on the high side of the grid, then the order type will be a sell, so multiplier will be a 1. We already have level price, which is where we've come in and placed this trade, plus equals level size by 1, which puts the level price at one level above where we are now. If we've come into this with an order type buy, then it means we're buying so that we can retrace upwards, and the next level will be one level below where we're placing this order. So in that case, let me scroll here, multiplier will be -1, level price will be plus equals level size multiplied by -1, which is the same as saying level price minus equals level size. So that will place the level price one level below where we're placing this current trade. Exit price is just the opposite because we're looking for a retracement, so exit price is minus equals exactly the same number. And then we call display levels. So this code is now common for the buy and the sell side, and so I don't need to make any further changes in multiple places. Now, just to show that we haven't made any material impact in terms of the trades that are taken and the profits, although we should be making more profit now because we're incurring less costs. So I have loaded here Stop Loss Grid Part 2 version 1. The only change I've made to that code is the code where it was exiting the expert, so that was hard coded, and I've had to comment that out because I actually want this to run through the entire year just for the demonstration. The inputs that I have, I've set the trade gap at 200 points or 20 pips. That's quite close. I expect that this will hit the stop loss far more than you would like, and so this is not going to be very profitable, but it will show a good spread of transactions. And 0.01 for the order size. So you can see there we did hit the stop loss quite often, but we've had a good spread of transactions. If I go to the backtest results, a loss of $74 on that because we hit the stop loss so often. Now I've got Stop Loss Grid version 5, V5. The inputs are the same, 200. I'm using the input here to say that I'm not going to stop on a stop loss. And you can see a very similar chart. Backtest results, Total net profit $23.54, or loss $23.54, so a little bit better, and that's mainly because of the savings in the spread and commissions. And this is only a back test, so I've actually got my spread and commissions quite low on this back test. That would be more of a saving to you in a real life situation. We still have quite a lot of drawdown because of the closeness of the stop loss point. The total number of trades is down, so the changes we've made actually reduce the number of trades you take. They'll improve the profitability of this, but remember, you need to adjust this and be prepared to shut it down if the markets are not doing what you expect. It's good for a ranging market that stays within a well-defined boundary. If you found this useful, then please click the like button, and if you want to see more of our videos, click subscribe, and then if you click the bell icon, you'll be notified when we release our next video. Thank you for watching.